Welcome back to a top-level game of professional StarCraft 2. What I've got for you today is a best-of-5 series where in game number 1 we find ourselves on Stargazers. Now spawning right here in the top right-hand corner of the map, playing with the purple Zerg drones. From Finland, we have Serral, and his opponent in the top left with the yellow Protoss pieces. From Italy, we are looking at Reynor's main Nexus. Now, when I just noticed that Reynor apparently plays Protoss in this series, I was just reminded of a little conversation that these two had a couple of months ago. So this series was played recently during TSL 9, but back in July, this is what they wrote on Discord. So Slowly says, getting your wish to play Reynor. What happens if he decides to play Protoss? Serral responds by saying, I would get a free win. And Reynor says, you wish, buddy. At the time, I don't believe that Serral actually was going up against Reynor's Protoss, but we'll find out together exactly where Reynor is currently at against the greatest Zerg player on the planet. There's no denying that Serral is very, very scary when it comes to playing ZVP. Especially since Reynor actually is one of the very few players that does well against Serral overall. I think that's mostly because of Serral's Zerg versus Zerg being considered to be his weakest matchup. Although, you know, weakest matchup with a little asterisk right next to it. There's no denying that he's still very good at it. But he's definitely more vulnerable in ZVZ than he is in ZVP. So, obviously what we've seen in the past as well in previous series is Reynor switching away from Protoss after, for example, losing the first 2 games of a series. So, if that ends up being the case in this match as well, I wouldn't be surprised if he is deciding to... yeah, play a little bit of Zerg instead. Anyways, we'll find out. This is one of those games, though, that is, yeah, particularly exciting for a fan of StarCraft. As I've said many times before, I really like the fact that Reynor has been playing some of his off races lately and that he's actually competing with Protoss. Even though he's been very successful with Zerg, I mean, he's a previous world champion of StarCraft 2, right? He won the world championships. He won a ridiculous amount of money playing SC2, especially with a Zerg. It's really fun to see that he also decided to mix in a little bit of Protoss. We saw the same thing, obviously, back in the day as well with Flash. After Flash in StarCraft 1 basically won everything for like a decade playing Terran, he decided to switch to random, and guess what? He just kept winning anyways. Anyhow, that was, yeah, that was a fun little phase, I guess, of StarCraft 1's history. I believe that Flash right now is doing his mandatory military service, so maybe at some point in a couple years' time, he'll once again be at the top of the game. We'll see what he decides to go for then. But anyways, it's going to be a Stargate opener right here from Reynor. Not all too surprising. Obviously, the Stargate, super common in the Protoss versus Zerg matchup. Especially on Stargazers, it's really easy to harass your opponent. And obviously, you can grab a third Nexus relatively easily as well if you have a couple of those Oracles available. So 9 times out of 10 right now, Reynor decides to go indeed for the Oracles and then eventually into a Twilight Council, a Forge, a very quick third Nexus, and the whole shebang. I have also seen him play double Phoenix openers. So he goes for like a second Stargate and then he starts chrono boosting out Phoenixes. I have seen him play that in the past as well, but I do believe that his bread and butter with Protoss versus Zerg at the very least is that, yeah, that massive gateway-based style. Okay. Zergling tried sneaking in. This is one of those little Serral moves, right? Keeping one Zergling alive. Like, if you're gonna be a Zergling in any of these Zerg players' armies, I feel like Serral is the guy that will take, you know, care of you the best. Even though he probably won't be... That was actually perfect. That little Zergling scout just saw everything. Anyhow, it didn't get into the base, but it still scouted, yeah, a hell of a lot. Anyhow. Yeah, every little Zergling apparently is important in the army of Serral. At least at this stage in the game. So... at this point, yeah, we haven't seen a third Nexus just yet on the low ground. That's what Serral's looking for right now as well with those links. Because indeed it's going to be taken in a pocket base. So, ooh, alright. Well, it is going to be a second Stargate. Interesting. He decides to go for the pocket base expo together with another Stargate. This is quite tricky for the Zerg player to scout. So, once again, a Zergling sees the timing of the second Oracle as well. Serral's so nasty, man, when it comes to his gameplay. It's honestly sick. This guy is so good when it comes to, especially ZVP and ZVT. It's almost, yeah. That game that he recently played against Cure as well, right? That match that I casted. He just seemed in control from start to finish. I mean, spoiler alert. Maybe I should have said that before spoiling it. But he really does seem to have, like, when he's in his comfort zone and when he's, yeah, playing well, he really does seem nearly unbeatable. Anyhow, I like this little move here. It is indeed going to be a double Phoenix opener from Reynor. Did Serral just scout that? He just scouted that too? I'm actually going to back off for just a little bit. So we've seen that little Zergling move, right? So the Zerglings have touched the watchtower at the perfect time to see the incoming oracles twice now. And this is the point where apparently Serral, yep, flies in with the Overlord. He comes back in a moment as well to see what's producing. You know, the cool part is Overlords have more vision range than structures that are finished have. So at this point, Serral knows what he's going up against, but Reynor does not know that he's been spotted. It's a lot of little moves, man, that really do make a difference. Now, obviously, this game is by no means won here for Serral, but he definitely is making all the right decisions so far. Okay. So, yeah, Reynor at this point thinking that he's pulling a sneaky one in his opponent. He's going to start chrono boosting out as many Phoenixes as possible, and then he will, yeah, suddenly show up on the other side of the map. But little does he know, Serral already knows what he's going up against. So what exactly is the response going to be? It's a pretty quick lair. Nothing all too crazy, though. Normally, we see a lair right around this time as well. It's going to finish up in just a moment. Is he going to go into a Hydra Den, or is he going to go into a Spire? We'll see. Oh, it's going to be an Infestation Pit here? Okay. So maybe he's going to double down on Queens for the time being, then. Oh, that's what we're doing. Okay. So wait, he goes for an Infestation Pit together with a Nidus network. So this is the first time, yeah, so he's even, oh my god, this is almost a little bit sad right here for Reynor. He hasn't seen the Overlord. He's now patrolling on the watchtower to make sure that no Zerglings would scout these incoming Phoenixes. But Serral has already been in a know for this for minutes. So Serral decides to, okay, go for a Nidus Worm. This does get scouted by Reynor. Where are we gonna go? Well, he's only got vision at the front, so I think that's probably the move. Yeah, that's what Reynor is thinking of right now too. Problem is, yeah, you may have Phoenixes available, but they're not very good when it comes to killing Nidus Worms, right? Because, well, they can't lift anything up. There is one Oracle falling around these Zerglings, but that Overlord in the corner of the main base is still not scouted. You know what? If the units go straight into the main, I believe that that is basically GG. Void Rays start up, and that's nice and all. But that is one massive Zerg infestation inside of the main base of the Protoss. And maybe Serral was right. If Reynor decides to pick Protoss against him, maybe he does get a quote-unquote free win. Okay, maybe free win is not an entirely correct way of putting this game so far, but this was absolute domination. Okay, that didn't take long. Game number 2, we find ourselves in Cosmic Sapphire, and Reynor has decided to switch to Zerg. You can't blame him, right? It's not that game number 1 was a particularly bad loss. He just didn't realize he was scouted, and Serral went for the counter of that build. Anyways, I guess in his mind as well, if he were to lose 2 games in a row and then switch to Zerg, that would obviously be, yeah, near impossible. Winning against Serral 3 games in a row, unlikely that that's going to happen. And then again, you can't really blame him for trying either, because if he would have been able to win this series with Protoss, that would probably be a permanent scar in Serral's mind, right? Since these guys, yeah, they face off against each other quite frequently in those offline tournaments. I guess it would be nice to be able to win like that, but anyways. Apparently, Reynor has decided to switch to Zerg, and while he can go back to Protoss if he wants to, I haven't seen him do that before, where he, like, switches back and forth multiple times. Anyway, sorry, I'm too curious. Pause, please. Can we turn off the light? It's destroying my eyes. I'd like mine less bright as well, or just turned off. Hello? Someone on the way. All right. That actually happens all the time. Even though esports events have been a thing for quite some time right now, it sometimes feels like the guys that are in charge of making a tournament look really pretty on camera, they get a little bit carried away and they don't realize that it can be actually quite annoying if you can't see your screen. I know. Especially if it's like right behind you, or even worse, if it's right in your face. Being forced to squint while you're playing a game of Zerg versus Zerg is not ideal. It's actually also very it's also very common for the commentators. There you go. It's very commentator for the comments. No, like that's not a correct sentence. It's pretty common as well for the commentators to have like a light straight at us. Can be a little bit annoying. Not just because it can be quite difficult to see your screen. I mean, obviously that's much worse for the players. But I found as a commentator at offline events, it can be quite annoying, especially because of the heat. Right? Those cameras, they or those lights rather, that generate a lot of heat, and, well, everything else with the computers and the cameras and all of that running in one big room. They don't want to crank the AC all too much either, if there is AC in the first place, but they don't want to crank it because then obviously you can hear it on the stream too, which is not ideal. So yeah. You know it's gonna be a rough day when it's 2 hours into a 12-hour long broadcast and it's already like 30 degrees. That sucks. That's happened in the past. And it's not ideal. Anyways, I guess these days though, esports has gotten quite a bit more professional. The stakes are definitely a bit higher, and therefore the studios are also built. They're built a little bit better. And I guess also camera technology has advanced quite a bit, right? Where these days cameras can handle a relatively high ISO without having a whole lot of noise, which allows you to not have, well, as many bright lights in the studio. Anyway, completely unrelated to what's going on in this game. Plus, I guess lights also have gotten better, right? LEDs in general are, yeah, definitely superior. Anyhow, identical build so far from the both of them. Quick triple hatch opener. Not uncommon at all. Different positioning right there on those very first structures, but other than that, this is pretty much a one-to-one copy. Bailing nests are coming up at the front. This is one of those things that you can't really skip. I mean, you can if you really want to, but you're taking a chance at that point. It's uncommon to see a link flood between these two, but it's still Zerg versus Zerg, and it still does happen, so... yeah, you gotta make sure you're rather safe than sorry. Relatively quick Evo chamber right here from Reynor. You never know, though, if that is just to complete the wall off, so Serral sees it right away. You never know if that's just to complete the wall off, or if he's actually planning on upgrading with it as soon as it finishes. Another thing you never know about the Evo chamber is whether or not it's a +1 missile, or a +1 melee, or even a +1 carapace. If you could scout that, that would be a huge indicator of the strategy that the opponent wants to go for, because usually +1 melee is a Zergling Baneling flood. +1 armor would be like a Roach Zergling based push, and +1 missile, usually a bit more of a macro focused game, so that's what Reynor decides to go for right here. But this is something we can see as the observer of this game, but all that Serral sees is an evolution chamber wiggling around a little bit, so it's indicating that something is upgrading, but he doesn't know what's happening in there. So that's why he's continuously scouting. He wants to see if that upgrade got cancelled, right? Because that's something we see as well in ZVZ, where initially that upgrade is researching when the opponent is scouting for it, and then you cancel it when they have left with that link. But Serral always dotting his I's and crossing his T's and all that, making 100% sure he knows as much as he can possibly know at this point in the game. That's really a key characteristic, actually, of Serral's games. Even though his Zerg versus Zerg is not as good, he's always scouting. Like, it's... I don't know, man. Whenever people say that he doesn't have good ZVZ, I don't think they realize how dominant the other matchups are. That's really the key. Maybe it's also because Zerg versus Zerg is... well, you're forced to play against guys like Reynor, like Dark, like Rogue. Maybe you don't get as much quality practice in either, right? It's quite tricky to spend an entire day playing Zerg versus Zerg compared to playing ZVT and ZVP. I mean, most people don't enjoy practicing the mirror matchups as much in StarCraft 2. Although I don't think that's the reason why Serral probably, yeah, is not feeling as comfortable in this matchup as in the others. Anyways, what do we have right here? Reynor has decided to go for the Nematized Carapace, so that's the Overlord speed. And once again, Serral goes for a Nidus network. Okay, then. Once upon a time, we critiqued Serral for being a bit too macro-focused. And while he still likes to play the majority of his games like that, he's definitely not afraid to mix it up. Reynor is going to scout this in just a moment. He's currently looking for spires and all that. He's already seen the structure, though. I don't think he clicked on it just yet, so this is actually all a little bit awkward. He's still busy defending at home. He's going to find out about it, but he really needs to see exactly what was building. He hasn't actually clicked on it. Okay, Nidus Worm is still going up. He scouts it right now with the Zerglings. Probably should have had the heads up of that a little bit sooner. Anyways, Roach Zergling push coming across the map. This is Serral with +1 missile done. So let's see. No fourth hatchery here for Serral, whereas there is one building right now for Reynor. He's trying to just jump straight on top of his army. Very nicely done right here by the finisher. Is there enough popping out of those cocoons right now for Reynor? I honestly don't... well, yeah, no. I think there is going to be enough here eventually. Defender's advantage is super nice. Initially, that looked really good right there for Serral, but... drones in the main base. End up taking a bunch of damage. 12 workers have gone down, but... That's pretty much the exact work account that Reynor had leading over his opponent. So if he holds like this, I think he's still going to feel pretty good about it, right? Yeah, some damage is being done. A bunch of drones are being killed, but it's not like those Nidus worms are free either. I think this is fine, honestly. It's very chaotic, but I think this is fine for Reynor if he holds. Okay, I love that. A couple of roaches apparently charged with knocking down the worms out of the main base, and they can also apparently target the one in that little corner at the third. 5 additional drones. Okay, so that may actually have just justified this push here for Serral, but yeah, nothing amazing, right? So 43, 44 roaches have gone down on the side of the finisher. He still doesn't have a 4th hatch. He didn't go for any additional upgrades either, so neither player actually committing to additional upgrades, probably concerned of losing the game or, well, planning on winning the game by the time that those upgrades would have finished up. But it looks to me that we are just transitioning right now towards a later stage game. There's a worm over here on the left. Maybe that scream is just forcing Reynor to sit back for the time being, trying to bait that army towards the bottom left corner. Yeah, roaches here really want to kill that hatchery. You can get it if he commits, but... Okay. Dancing back and forth, using the Niduses. I love it. Yep, nicely done. He does snipe the 4th base. Reynor did sneak in quite a few drones once again, though, while we were in the... Well, I want to say downtime of that fight, but I don't really know if that counts, because it was only like 30 seconds of it. But he did squeeze out a bunch of drones during all of that. Yeah, Serral has really found a love for the Nidus worm lately. He doesn't hotkey them, as far as I know. Like, he hotkeys the Nidus network. It's not like he really changed anything as far as that also goes. But yeah, he's looking very strong. He's liking the way, I guess, that it allows you to maneuver your units around the map. He used to do a lot of Overlord drops. But I guess the Nidus worm has sort of taken over that, yeah, unit mobility. Alright, so 6 Nidus worms have gone down. Not entirely free, of course, but it does feel like that when you play against it. Okay, so the end result is a relatively even game. Reynor right now going double upgrades, whereas Serral is going for only a single upgrade. His upgrade, however, is a little bit faster. So if you can hit right when his upgrade finishes, and he can force a battle right at that point, his units will be quite a bit stronger. However, if Reynor gets another, I want to say 30 seconds or so. So this is scouted right now as well by Serral. If he gets another 30 seconds or so after the upgrade of Serral is done, his upgrades are going to be quite a bit better. He's also now going for a roach drop. He's going for a roach tunneling claws. So Reynor is doubling down on the roach tech. Serral's still going for Nidus worms. There's one once again in the back of the main base. So even though Serral here dancing at the 4th, mostly just trying to create a distraction. So this worm will go up. Okay. Yeah, you only need a couple drones. Still punishing here at the front too, so you gotta be super careful. This is nice. Spire coming up for Serral. My god, okay. Very different than what he used to play in this matchup, that's for sure. Looks like we are gonna trade units here eventually. Ravager's falling on the side of Reynor. We're still dancing back and forth. Can he snipe that 4th base? I mean, he's gonna try, and I think he might very well, yeah, he may very well be able to get it. Nicely done. Serral's looking scary lately, isn't he? So much chaos everywhere. Yep, there it is. GG. Normally, Reynor is the fastest pro player, at the very least APM-wise. But I guess in that previous game, he couldn't quite keep up with all the multitasking of Serral. To be fair, though, APM is obviously not everything, right? Usually when you start losing on one side of the map and you're being attacked in multiple areas, usually you'll start losing the other fights as well eventually. Like, it's kind of like a house of cards, you know? Like, it looks relatively stable, but once it goes, usually the whole tower collapses. And I guess that's the problem that Reynor ran into. You lose a little bit here and there, you lose the 4th hatch, a few drones in the main base, and all of it adds up to a much bigger army eventually. I think actually in general, and this goes for pretty much every RTS game, it's usually much easier to be the aggressor than it is to be the defender. So in StarCraft 2, for example, cheesing is way easier than defending cheese. Speaking of cheese, so we're going for what seems to be a spawning pool at 16 supply. Nothing all too crazy. This is a anti-cheese sort of timing. Would be really great if Reynor decided to go for a 12 pool or a 13-12 or early game aggression in general. Not the case, however, as Reynor decided to go for a hatch into a gas into a spawning pool. Honestly, I don't think Reynor is going to go for a cheese in the early game anymore in this series. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. If someone wanted to go for an early game cheese, right now would be the time for Serral, right? Could have gone for a 12 pool. Could have pulled all the boys as well. Maybe even win the game straight up. Although that would be very out of character. Nidus Worms is as crazy as we're going to make it today, I think. 2 Zerglings used for the scouting right now. Oftentimes with a 16 pool, what we see is Zerg players saving up 3 larvae and then making 6 Zerglings right when the spawning pool finishes. Not what Serral went for here. So I guess this makes it so that the hatchery versus pool first situation is... Yeah, the pool first at the very least is not as significant of a deficit. Huh? Serral doing a cute little Vespian Geyser extractor trick together with a Spore Crawler, I guess. Hitting a small little supply block. Maybe just a tad late on that next Overlord. So what you can do is you can morph in a structure, spend another larva, and then cancel the structure, and it puts you at a higher than your total amount of supply, well, would allow normally. Obviously at the cost of canceling the structure. Canceling an extractor is pretty cheap. Same for a Spore, but usually it's much easier to just prevent the supply block instead. Anyways, 3rd hatchery coming up here for Reynor. I am expecting the same thing on the other side of the map here, yeah. You can definitely play a 2-base opener in Zerg versus Zerg as well, but... Yeah, I think it makes sense to go for a triple hatch most of the time if you know that your opponent is good at defending cheeses and early game aggression in general. This is where you play Zergling Chicken, where basically you always want to have your opponent's amounts of Zerglings +2. So you want to have a little bit more, but you don't want to have so many that you know, have way more Zerglings that you can't really win the game with. Because every time you make a set of Zerglings, it means you're not making a drone. Serral actually making quite a few of them right now. He does have his Baneling Nest already done. On the other side of the map, though, we see Reynor's finishing as well, so he should be able to morph in a couple of defensive Banes. Yep. So at this point, he's seen a group of Zerglings moving across. He scouted additional Zerglings as well. Definitely needs to respect this and respond. This is a hit squad, I believe, to try and counter the opponent's 3rd base. Is there enough right now for Reynor to actually counter that 3rd base? Or sorry, for Serral to counter that 3rd base. Okay. I think there will be. What was that, dude? Okay. Serral, I guess, missing some of his hotkeys over there. Accidentally runs 2 Banelings into the hatchery. A couple of Zerglings into a Baneling as well. Not what you want to have happen there. But does mean that Reynor at this point is slightly ahead. Reynor did decide to forgo the Roach Warren for now. Really needs to start that up. Okay. Guess he's busy counter-attacking. Still enough defensive Banelings available at this point as well for Serral. Who's also going for a +1 missile upgrade. So in the end, this is going to be a relatively even game. But obviously, Reynor has been allowed to squeeze out a couple more drones. So income advantage, yeah, is going to be in favor right here of the Italian Stallion. And obviously, when you're both making the exact same units, having, well, additional drones, having additional economy is super sweet. No lair, though. No lair yet. Really? Always got to be thinking about those potential Baneling morphins, right? Anyways. At the same time, nice little bit of harassment right here from Reynor. Going after the Queen at the Zerg's 3rd. Ends up sniping it. Needs to be careful, though. Okay. Beautiful detonations right there by Serral. Blowing up a bunch of those Zerglings on the way out. Lair is going to finish up in about 30 seconds or so for Serral. So if he wants to, he can transition to something higher tech. Zerglings at this point, though, scout the timing of that Lair. They're going to start working on some of the drones in the main base. And Serral has been scattered all over the map. He's pulled the queens to the front. And he doesn't have much to defend over here. So nice little pickoff. At the same time, Baneling's now hunting down the drones. And will they be able to find some? You don't want to get too greedy, man. Oh my god. Really? Okay. I think Reynor probably is smelling blood at this point. He probably wants to win the game right here, right now. But I think he could have actually just gone and picked up maybe 5 or so additional drones. Greed is a very real thing in a game with StarCraft 2, man. Apparently, yeah, Serral right now even cancels the spine. He's like, okay, I don't need it anymore. Got this one already held. Need the money that I've just lost to, well, spend on additional drones instead. Still an advantage, I would say, for Reynor, but could have been a bigger one, that's for sure. Spire coming up, actually. Oftentimes what we see with Spire play right now is a couple mutas. Maybe not a couple. Like 4 couples of mutas. Like 8 mutas or so. So you make one group of mutas, you try to grab that match control, or map control rather, you take down all of your opponent's spotter units. All of these overlords will likely be pulled back home, or maybe they're gonna get picked off. And at that point, you can try and hit your opponent in the face with a lot of roaches and ravagers, because the opponent never really knows if there are going to be additional mutas, right? Like, you never know when you're playing against mutas how many there are going to be. So sometimes you play against 8, sometimes you play against 28, right? And against 28, you need a very different approach. Okay, so Serral is scouting around. 3 queens are working on this overseer. And I think it's gonna be sniped. Never mind. Nemesis Carapace. Okay, finished up at the perfect time, and Serral does scout the Spire. Very important for him, so he's gonna be the defender in this game. Well, he already has been. Decides to plant down the Hydralisk's den right away. But yeah, it's gonna be 6 mutas right here, so 3 pairs, and then +2 is gonna finish up on those roaches in just a moment. There's apparently even a drop coming up for Serral, probably trying to buy a little bit of time of his own as well. So what are we putting in there? Just 4 roaches. Fair enough. Overseer here scouting around the map as well for Reynor, so he's now saw his opponent's Hydra transition. Spores are coming up. A couple of Hydras are coming up too. So how many Hydras is he going to make here? Mutas at this point are out. They're going to start working on those Overlords. Serral's bringing back all of the Overlords though. The ones at least that he can spare the APM to send back home. One group of roaches here moving on the right side of the map. I quite like that. Reynor does scout this as well, but does he pay attention to the mini-map right at this point in time? Always a little bit difficult to know. I think judging here by the mutas, he is flying on over in that direction. So he'll probably find those roaches inside of their private jet here in just a sec. At the same time though, Reynor's pushing across. He's got a good amount of roaches. Yeah, there's still a good chunk here as well for Serral, who's now adding on Hydras in the mix. Hydras are fantastic, but honestly, this is way more roaches in yellow than there are in purple, right? Am I crazy? Hydras do have a lot of DPS, but they don't have their ranged upgrade just yet, so they couldn't actually fire there for quite some time. With the ranged upgrade, they have an easy time firing over all of those roaches and ravagers, but right now they're a little far in the front. This is looking good, though, right here for Reynor. Yeah, 5th base coming up in the bottom right. He's got the 4th base, mostly saturated. Can obviously transfer drones from his other bases towards that outer base as well, and that's going to make mining that one quite a bit easier. We've seen a good chunk of Overlords going down too. Okay, now Reynor is splitting up his units, and this is super hard for Serral to predict, because look at his minimap awareness right now. Look at his vision. He has none. So basically, he's forced to pre-split his units. This is obviously where Lurkers are amazing, but we're not quite at Lurker tech just yet. Roaches on the left side of the map will be pushed back, but at the same time, the roaches on the right side are cleaning up the shop there. Beautifully done. Sniping the hatchery. 11 drones have gone down, and I think at this point, as Reynor, what you do is rinse and repeat, right? He's got a hive, so that's nice. He can transition if he wants to, but I think you just stick around on a unit composition that you've already got. He's gonna lose a bunch of roaches here in the top left. Good split off right there from Serral. Problem is, Serral's losing the main fight at home, right? Or at least he was until the reinforcements showed up. Mutas right now being annoying too. They're going to start going after some of the drones. There should be Hydras available. Yeah. One Infestor coming up here for Reynor. He's going for Tunneling Claws. So despite the fact that he just made it, well, close to hive tech, apparently he's still gonna make the transition towards tunneling cloud roaches, which is kind of interesting. I honestly think what you do right here is just remix. So now we're talking 5 base Reynor versus 3 base Serral. A very significant supply lead as well. I think you just want to force a fight here, Reynor. I think that's really all you need to do. Army supplies. They have evened up now that Serral has had a bit of time. Worker counts at this point, though, yeah, no longer good enough as Serral decides to tap out of the game. Okay, next up, Data C. Could this be the beginning of a comeback? I wouldn't mind seeing it. Stellar game right there from Reynor. Not really running into any issues. Opening up with hatch gas pool once again. Same can be said on the other side of the map, though. Serral opening up with a normal game, too. Yeah, getting that extra point on the board is super important, right? When you're 2-0 behind, you really do feel like you're just about to get crushed. Like a 3-0 defeat sucks for many reasons. But, yeah, 3-1 already feels quite a bit better, and 2-1 certainly does feel quite a bit better. If we can even up the score to 2-2, then suddenly that final game is going to be very dicey for the opponent, right? If you're 2-0 behind, you manage to even up the score, suddenly momentum is swinging in your favor, and, well, the game can look quite a bit more straightforward. Anyways, he's got another map to go before we get there. Serral obviously does not want to let that happen. Serral apparently running with the skull and the gun and the sword. Is that from the Nova Coverdomes? I'm not entirely sure. I actually don't know if these guys have completed the campaigns. I've noticed over the years that there's like 2 camps when it comes to pro players, okay? I might be mistaken, but this is a theory of mine. It seems like, roughly speaking, there's 2 camps of pro gamers. There's the camp that loves competition, right? The camp that loves competition, and that's the only thing they do. They don't play the campaign. They do absolutely nothing other than play 1 versus 1. And then you have the guys that absolutely love video games. They will play other games in StarCraft 2 as well. They just played StarCraft 2 and they happen to be very good at it, so eventually they transition towards being a pro gamer. But they're actual gamers. I actually remember this very distinctly from a very long time ago. When Idra, when he was playing StarCraft 2 professionally, so we're talking like 2010, 2011, 2012 or so. This is a very long time ago. But he mentioned very specifically that even though he was a professional gamer, he didn't think of himself as a gamer. Like, he thought of himself as a competitor, and StarCraft 2 just happened to be the outlet that he was, well, playing at the time. I think these days, actually, he does bodybuilding and maybe a couple other things as well, but I remember there was an interview with him. This must have been like 2019 or so. I don't know, I'm just guessing, but quite a few years after he wrapped up pro gaming, and he mentioned that even though he had been a pro gamer for a very significant chunk of his life, after that section of his life ended, he no longer had a gaming computer. Like, he just had a laptop, but he hadn't played any video games in a long time. Which is kind of interesting, right? I never really thought of it like that, but yeah, StarCraft 2, definitely an outlet for many people just to be as competitive as possible. And obviously both Serral and Reynor are very competitive, but not sure if they have played the campaigns. You'd be surprised, though. I think probably maybe on the higher end of things, probably about half of the pro players have done the campaigns. A very significant portion have never played the campaigns or got bored halfway through and quit. Crazy, right? I don't know. I think that's pretty crazy. Like, 99% of players in StarCraft 2 started playing with the campaigns. And for some reason, like 50% of the top-level competitors never bothered playing the campaigns, which, yeah. Anyways, once again, very similar builds here from the both of them. We've seen Baneling Nests at the front, Evo Chambers when the Baneling Nest finished up, Zerg Scouts all over the map, Lairs once again at conventional timings, and you can see that even though, once more, the timings are maybe ever so slightly different. In the end, we will end up at a very, very similar mid-game. Alright, that means we're once again heading to a Roach War territory. +1 missile here, in sync. Usually when you're going for a lair, going for the Nematized Carapace is also pretty sweet. If you can afford it in a normal macro game, Overlord speed in Zerg vs. Zerg is very worth it. Couple reasons as to why. First off, obviously for that Overseer Scout, because the Overseer speed improvement is super nice. But secondly, you can start patrolling your Overlords around, which makes it really difficult for the opponent to actually hit your, well, your units when they are starting to roam the map with those corrosive biles. Okay. Spire coming up for Reynor. Yeah, it worked well for him in the last game. Why not? The only problem with a Spire, obviously, is that it's rather expensive. It's 200 minerals, 200 gas. Mutas are 100 minerals, 100 gas each. So it's very gas heavy, meaning that you can't really afford a whole lot of Roaches and Ravagers at the same time. But Reynor playing this out as if he is just going for a normal macro game here as a follow-up. Overlord speed is going to finish here for a moment for Serral. He started... Actually... Oh, I think he must have canceled the upgrade. Didn't he start it up? Am I crazy? Was that his opponent? Did I just get too confused for some reason? No, I'm pretty sure he started it up and then canceled it. He also started up a Spine Crawler. So he probably was concerned for like a big push from the opponent. So, yeah. That's actually going to bite him in the butt a little bit. Never mind. I was going to say it's going to be really difficult to get an Overseer into the opponent's main base and scout the Spire. But, yep, he already went there. He already found it. Instant Infestation Pit. Once again, though, how many Mutas are we actually producing? So Serral at this point scouts the Roach push. Mutas are coming out in about 5. Yeah, 5 Mutas here in total. If everyone... Or, sorry. Ooh. I didn't even see that coming. Hold up. Let me just back off for a second. Where did that come from? Oh, they just walked? Ay, 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 ay. Well done. We've seen these guys trying to get super tricksy with their Overlord drops and their you know, Baneling shenanigans and then the Nidus worms and all of that. But sometimes just walking them into your opponent's mineral line can, well, be the best trick you can pull off. Especially if the opponent at that point, right? So, when the Mutas first pop, usually there's a lot of things you have to take care of. You gotta start up your Spore Crawlers, you gotta pull back your Overlords, you gotta get your Queens out in the right place at the right time. You have to, yeah, double check your bases. I guess at that point, it's pretty good to actually send in those Banelings, because there's a lot of chaos that you're creating right at that point in the game. Anyhow, despite the Mutas being out, and besides the map control right now heavily in favor of Reynor, still managed to sneak out a couple of those Roaches. I do think, though, that it's a one-way trip. These guys are not going to be able to go back home. Mutas right now will show up, and while the Roaches can unload, they're going to get picked off pretty easily. They're going to scout the Infestation Pit timing at the very least. Infestors coming up right now for Serral as well. Oh my god, a couple of Queens actually caught way off creep. Yep. There they go. And this is actually a really good engagement right now for Reynor. Yeah, I think he should continuously push. He's at now a near 50 supply lead. Okay. There is still that shenanigans on the other side of the map too, so a whole lot of that Reynor army was preoccupied defending at home, but he's got way too much, and he wins the game. Okay, so here we go. Our final game for today takes place on Tropical Sacrifice. Both players opting to go for a hatchery, into a gas geyser, into a spawning pool. And not all too surprising, although we haven't seen a single bit of early game cheese here in this particular series. Kind of interesting, because that's where you're going to face off against 9 times out of 10 in the, you know, on the StarCraft 2 ladder. It's very easy to accidentally lose the game by the 2-minute mark, but at this level of play, we don't see it all too often. There is, by the way, definitely a late game to Zerg vs. Zerg as well, but so far, yeah, these games have been very mid-game focused. The problem is, right, even though Hydra Lurker Viper is amazing, it's also very expensive. You need like 10 gases in order to run that properly. Obviously, you need to be at Hive Tech, you need to get your Lurker upgrades. All of that is super pricey. So while it does happen from time to time, it's not as common as, well, I personally like it to be. A lot of games end by the Lingbane phase, and if they don't end with the Lingbane phase, they will end with the Roach Ravager phase, and if they don't end at that point, right, someone will probably die to Mutas or Hydras or Nidus Worms or anything along those lines. It's very easy to accidentally lose a match of ZVZ. Anyways, standard openers here, once again. Quick baling nests at very appropriate timings. Once again, making sure that they are safe, but not so safe that they are, yeah, cutting corners. But they're making very sure here that they know exactly what they're going up against. That they're gonna be able to react as well. If, for example, there would be a big Zergling flood, all out of nowhere at this point in the tournament. Okay, Zergling Scout coming in for Reynor. Doesn't get too far. Evo Chamber starts up when the Baling Nest finishes. The same can be said on the other side of the map too. So that's the normal time. So usually what you do is you pull one drone out of gas at 100. You go for the Zergling speed. Then you plant down the third hatchery. Add the drone back into the gas geyser. Go for a Baling Nest with your next 50 gas. And then when the Baling Nest finishes up, you go for the Evo Chamber. Then you go for the upgrade. And then eventually the lair. That's usually roughly the gas spending. Okay, +1 missile once again. +1 missile as well happening on the other side of the map. Personally, I'm a big fan of the +1 armor upgrade at this point. So +1 armor is awesome because you can go for a big roach push. Works really well on the ladder. I actually highly recommend that build. I think a relatively aggressive early game is a good idea. So maybe like a... I don't know, like not like an all-in type of 12 pool, but a 12 pool where you make a bunch of Zerglings, maybe try to force your opponent to cancel the natural. That sort of opener into a +1 armor upgrade. It's really powerful because you need to react to what the opponent is doing, and if you're not really super comfortable playing against a 12 pool, it's actually really hard to know the exact timing of the +1 armor attack as well. Anyways, we have a little bit of a Zergling skirmish coming right up. Not bad at all. Serral, yeah, grabbing a bunch of those drones really nicely. Suddenly hitting his opponent in the face from multiple angles. And you know what? That may have very well now allowed him to snipe the third hatch on top of those 5 drones as well. Serral's making workers on the back of this. So he doesn't want to go all in with this, but yeah, grabbing that hatchery is amazing for him. Nicely done. Okay, that wasn't less nicely done. So what do you do now if you're Reynor? Do you just retake the third hatch? I guess so. But this is a nice little advantage right here for the player from Finland. 28 Zerglings, getting 5 drones and a hatchery. Not bad at all. Mostly, of course, because he's got a lot of drones mining at his own third base. Even though the cost of that push was quite significant. You can see it here eventually. It did allow him to, yeah, get a nice lead. There are a couple banelings here on the right side of the map. Zergling scouting the drone count right now at the third base, and that's the moment where your heart sinks, right? If you're Reynor here, because you realize, wait a second, my opponent has full saturation to third base already. Okay, he decides to go for his own Spire. So once again, the Mutas are going to be flapping their wings around this map in just a moment. But now this is, for all intents and purposes, like a 2-base-ish type of Spire opener. And when normally you go for a 2-base Spire, it would already be done. Look at that. A little bit of a party over here. Not bad. Okay, Zerglings loading themselves into that Overlord. It's a slow Overlord. So it takes a little bit before that Zergling drop will head to the main base. But I think it'll get there eventually. And this might create a little bit more chaos. Maybe it's even going to force those Mutas to turn back home. It is once more though, +2 missile right here together with the Mutalisks. Serral doesn't know about the Spire at this point. Reynor actually scouts the slow Overlord drop, so the Mutas can turn right back home. Nicely done. Anyways, Roach Speed is finishing up here in just a moment. And Mutas are awesome and all, but you need to have them on the other side of the map if you actually want to stop this sort of attack. Right now we're talking 106 army supply versus only 60, well, 70 right now as I ended that sentence. Anyways, Roach is right now trying to just break straight through the front door here of Reynor. It's a little difficult to see exactly what's going on because of that overlord cloud right above this battle, but I believe that Serral just has way too much stuff. Forcing those mutas to stay at home, almost forcing out the Spire transition as well after sniping his opponent's third base. I believe that eventually the finisher has a little bit too much as he's overwhelming his opponent. GG is called, and indeed it's Serral who wins 3-2-2, but he definitely had to fight for this one. Hey, if you made it all the way until the end of this video, please take the 1 second that it takes to hit the like button down below. It really does help. Thank you very much.